I'm James Carter. The hiss of the personnel carrier ramp closing behind us wasn't just the sound of entry, it was the sound of the narrative shifting. One moment, raw survival against organic horror. The next, sterile steel and the unsettling quiet of organized power. We had stepped out of the chaos and into a system. And in any system, the first thing to be controlled isn't the threat, it's the information. Who controls the narrative? Controls the reality? Who benefits from the secrecy? My camera, strapped uselessly to my chest in the dark, felt less like a tool for documentation and more like forbidden evidence. Day 17. We sought sanctuary, but I think we just traded one cage for another. The inside of the personnel carrier was a black box, cramped, smelling of diesel and fear, packed in with the silent shapes of other survivors they'd picked up, and the unseen presence of the soldiers in the front compartment. It was disorienting, a deliberate sensory deprivation that stripped away our autonomy. We couldn't see where we were going, couldn't see who else was with us, couldn't see the faces of the soldiers in control. We were reduced to cargo. Allegory isn't subtle in this world. It hits you over the head with a steel door. The military, offering security, demanding absolute surrender of control, taking our weapons, our ability to fight, our sight, our knowledge of our destination. They don't want us to see. They don't want us to know. Information is power, and they're consolidating all of it. Artem was a small, trembling weight beside me, his initial relief at escaping the horde replaced by a quiet, palpable fear of this new, cold environment. He leaned against my side, his breathing shallow. Sasha sat opposite, her silhouette tense, her injured leg making her shift uncomfortably on the hard floor. Her usual fierce determination was still there, but it was overlaid with a deep wariness. Ivan, a solid form beside her, remained silently watchful, a sentinel in the dark, his gaze fixed forward, assessing the unseen soldiers. Alexei and Igor huddled together, whispering occasionally, their voices barely audible. They had seen something about the military before. Their fear felt different, more informed. And Yuri was a silent presence at the back of the carrier. I couldn't see him clearly in the dark, but I felt his stillness. His calmness was even more unsettling here, in this confined, controlled space. Was this familiar to him? Was this where he was taking us? The suspicion was a cold ember in my gut, refusing to die. My side was a burning fire, a constant throbbing reminder of my injury and the chilling possibility of infection. The rough ride of the carrier over uneven ground exacerbated the pain. I tried to press my hand against the soaked bandage, a futile attempt to staunch the ache. The thought of that claw, the raw gash, the possibility of contamination, it was a terrifying unknown. What would the screening reveal? What would happen to me if the virus had taken hold? We drove for a long time, hours, I think. Time felt warped in the darkness. The vehicle eventually slowed, the grinding of gears signaling our approach to a destination. We stopped. Engines idled. More sounds from outside. Heavy doors, footsteps, clipped voices, authority. The ramp hissed open. Light flooded in, harsh and blinding. Not the gray light of dawn or the gloom of the forest. White, artificial light, sterile. We shielded our eyes, blinking against the sudden glare. We were in a large, concrete space, a processing area. Bare walls, stained floor, drains in the corners. It smelled of disinfectant and something metallic. Soldiers stood rigidly, rifles at rest. visors down, faces hidden, impersonal, faceless. They moved with chilling efficiency. "Выходит!" A voice barked, amplified, flat. "Get out!" We were directed into a line. Our weapons were taken immediately, confiscated with swift, impersonal efficiency. Ivan's rifle, Sasha's machete, Artem's crowbar, my axe and knife. Even Yuri's knife was taken, his silent, unreadable compliance noted. It felt profoundly unsettling to be disarmed, stripped of our tools for survival, our only means of self-defense in the brutal world we had just left. We were utterly at their mercy now. "Documenti," a soldier said, holding out a gloved hand. "Documents. Documents?" The absurdity of it hit me. Passports? Identification? In the apocalypse? Ivan stated we had none. The soldier simply gestured towards a long table set up against the wall under a bare, buzzing fluorescent bulb. "Zapolnite ankiety." Fill out forms, bureaucracy, questions, the ultimate symbol of a system trying to reassert control over chaos. We were directed to sit. My side ached, making sitting difficult. I looked at the forms, not about names or professions, about our experiences, our movements, the infected we'd seen, our health, and questions about other survivors, networks, organized groups. They were fishing for information, for the resistance network, for anyone trying to organize outside their control. It wasn't just screening for infection. It was screening for information, for connections, for dissent. I answered vaguely, cautiously. "James Carter, journalist, London, survivor, met group, moved through woods, infected, found cabin, saw chimera, found village, escaped horde, met Alexei, Igor, encountered military." I left out key details, the military tags, the specifics of the chimera, the note from the cabin, and especially Yuri. What was I documenting now? The process of control, the questions they deemed important, the narrative they were trying to build. Artem struggled with his form, his haunted blue eyes darting nervously around the sterile room. He was questioned by one of the figures behind the table, a woman with a tired, impassive face. He looked scared, unsure how much to say. I wanted to reach out, but soldiers stood between us, silent, watchful, barriers of authority. Sasha filled out her form grimly, concisely. Ivan was brief, factual, revealing little. Alexei and Igor seemed wary, answering cautiously, their past experiences likely shaping their reluctance to share. And Yuri. Yuri was questioned separately by a soldier with a higher rank, his visor remaining down, his face completely hidden. Their conversation was low, in Russian. I couldn't hear the words, but I watched Yuri's posture, calm, controlled, answering questions without hesitation, without visible fear or discomfort. The soldier's posture remained rigid, but I sensed a different dynamic in that interaction. Not interrogation, more like a report, or debriefing, or confirmation. Was he telling them about us? About everything we had seen? About me, the journalist? About the note? Was this his intended destination all along? My side burned, pain intensifying. I finished the form, handed it back. My hand was shaking. The figure who took it, their face obscured by the low light, glanced at my answers, then at me. Their eyes lingered on my torn, bloodied jacket. "Medicинский осмотр," they said, gesturing towards another room. Medical examination. Finally, my wound, but also screening for infection. The chilling possibility of the claw scratch came back. Was this where they would find out? What would happen if they did? The word liquidation from the military note echoed in my mind. I was led to a separate room, small, sterile, brightly lit, cold concrete floor, white walls. A man in a white lab coat, mask, and visor waited. Not a doctor, a scientist, a technician. He didn't speak, just gestured for me to remove my jacket and shirt. The cold air hit my wound. The gash was deep, ragged, still bleeding sluggishly. The surrounding skin was red, inflamed. Infection? Or just irritation? The scientist examined it, gloved fingers probing gently. His silence was unnerving. His eyes behind the visor were clinical, detached. He took a sample with a swab, placed it in a vial labeled with a barcode, then cleaned and bandaged the wound efficiently. Clinical, impersonal. Adhai, he said, his voice flat, devoid of empathy. Rest. He gestured toward a cot in the corner. Clean sheets, a blanket. It felt like a luxury, but the atmosphere was cold, sterile. Not a place of healing, a place of processing. A laboratory. I lay down, body aching, side throbbing. The clean bandage felt better, but the fear of infection, of the sample testing positive, lingered. What happened to those who tested positive? Were they separated? Contained? Liquidated? Часть 2. Від звуків зовні кімнати я міг почути інших, що обробляються. Voices, footsteps, the rustle of paper, the low murmur of questions and answers. I listened for Artem's voice, Sasha's, Ivan's. Were they okay? Were they being questioned about me? About Yuri? About the note? The chimera? What was happening to Alexei and Igor? To the other silent people from the transport? The silence from Yuri was the most unnerving. Was he still being questioned? Or was he already somewhere else? Somewhere deeper inside this facility? A place of different purpose? The thought that he might be here as something other than a survivor, as someone connected to the military or their operations, was growing stronger, heavier. Hours passed. The sterile white room, the silence broken only by the distant sounds of the facility, felt like a prison cell. My mind raced, trying to piece it all together. The military, the experiments, the chimeras, the cover-up, the turned soldiers with dog tags, the systematic control of information, and now this, evacuation, screening, a facility hidden away. It wasn't an end to the nightmare. It was a new phase, a different kind of cage, a cage built not of steel bars, but of secrecy, bureaucracy, and control. Allegories were screaming now. The state's power, the individual's vulnerability, the manipulation of truth in a crisis. I had come looking for the human story of the apocalypse. I had found the story of humanity itself, its capacity for both incredible resilience and horrifying cruelty, its desperate struggle for survival, and its terrifying instinct for control, its ability to create monsters, both biological and systemic. And now, I was trapped within the very system I suspected was the source of it all. My injury, a physical vulnerability that had forced my hand, my knowledge, gained through documentation, a potential threat to their control. My identity as a journalist. What would they do with that? Would they see me as a threat to be neutralized, or a tool to be used to shape their narrative? The air in a room was cold, sterile. The silence was heavy. I reached for my journal again, fumbling for my pen. I had to write this down. Every detail, every suspicion, the questions asked, the atmosphere of the facility, the unsettling calm of Yuri. If I disappeared into this place, this military labyrinth, this record might be the only thing that survived. The truth, documented in a damp journal, hidden from the prying eyes of the system that wanted to control the narrative. As I lay there trying to write, a guard entered the room, visor down, expressionless. He didn't speak, just stood by the door, watching me with that same impersonal, faceless gaze. The feeling of being observed, of being under constant surveillance, was pervasive. There was no privacy here, no freedom. Later, much later, after the initial wave of pain from my side had subsided to a dull throb, the scientist in the mask and visor returned. He held a clipboard. He didn't look at me directly. Vasha proba, he began, his voice flat, clinical. Your sample? My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The result. Otricatelne, he finished. Negative. Negative. Relief washed over me. So sudden and intense, it almost made me lightheaded. Not infected. Not turned. A reprieve. A chance. But the relief was quickly followed by a new wave of questions. How accurate were their tests? What happened to those whose samples were positive? Were they even testing for the right thing? Was the chimera virus different? The scientist made a note on his clipboard. Budete perivedeni. You will be transferred. Transferred? Where? To a hospital. Or somewhere else? The lack of information was a form of control. He gestured for me to get up. My body was stiff, sore. My side still ached. The clean bandage was visible under my torn shirt. I followed him out of the room. The sterile corridor outside was long, fluorescent lit, lined with similar doors. Other rooms where others were being processed. I was led down a series of corridors, all the same bare concrete and harsh lighting. We passed soldiers, technicians, other figures in lab coats, all moving with efficiency, purpose. No one made eye contact. No one smiled. It was a machine operating smoothly, hidden from the outside world. We reached a large metal door. A guard stood by it. The scientist nodded to the guard, gestured towards me. The door opened with a low hum. I stepped through and found myself in a different kind of space, less sterile, more communal. A large room with rows of cots, similar to the one I'd just been on. Huddled figures on the cots. More survivors, looking tired, wary, some with injuries. A few soldiers stood watch, and then I saw them. Artem, Sasha, Ivan, sitting on cots near the back of the room, looking up as I entered. Relief flooded my face. They were here. They were okay. For now. I hurried towards them, my side protesting with every step. Artem's face lit up with relief when he saw me. Sasha gave a small, tired smile. Ivan nodded, a grim acknowledgement. James, Artem whispered, getting up, rushing towards me. Ты в порядке? You are okay? Yep. Отрицательный, said, voice low. Negative. A small victory. Моя рана. Они перевязали. My wound. They bandaged it. Sasha looked at my side, her expression concerned. Сильно? She asked. Badly? Да. No. Не заражен, I confirmed. Yes. But not infected. Relief in my voice, but still wary. Ivan looked around the communal room. Всех сюда? He asked. Everyone here? Похоже, I replied. Looks like it. I scanned the faces of the other survivors in the room. Strangers. All processed. All screened. What were their stories? What had they seen? Yuri? Artem asked, looking around. My gaze searched the room. No sign of Yuri. Not among us. Not among the others. Ivan's expression hardened. Gideon. Where is he? The question hung in the air. Had he been processed and moved somewhere else? Somewhere deeper? Or had he never been intended to join this group of survivors? Was this room a holding pen for those who passed the initial screening? While others, like Yuri, perhaps, were directed elsewhere? A soldier approached, his face hidden by his visor. Ticho. Quiet. He gestured towards the empty cots. Vaše mesto. Your place. We settled onto the available cots. The metal frames were hard, the blankets thin. We were together, which was a small comfort, but the feeling of being confined, of being observed, was immense. Soldiers stood watch at various points in the room. No windows, just concrete walls and harsh fluorescent light. I looked at Ivan, Sasha, Artem. We had survived the village, the horde, the initial screening. But we were inside the military system now. My wound ached. My mind raced. Where were we? What was this place? What was their real agenda? And where was Yuri? My negative test was a reprieve, but it didn't erase my suspicions. The cold efficiency, the secrecy, the questions about networks. It all pointed to something more than just a safe zone. It felt like containment, like being collected. For what purpose? I fumbled for my journal. Had to write, document everything. The sterile rooms, the faceless scientists, the questions, the communal holding area, and Yuri's absence, his mysterious calm, his connection to this place, real or perceived, the possibility that he was not a fellow survivor, but someone embedded, someone guiding us here. This was a different kind of battle now, not against claws and teeth, but against information and control. My journalist's instinct was screaming, document, uncover, find the truth hidden behind the sterile walls and the expressionless visors. But how? Trapped inside, disarmed, observed, I began to write, the pen scratching against the paper, a defiant act in the oppressive silence. My story wasn't over. It had just entered a new, chilling chapter. A chapter about control, secrets, and the uncertain nature of sanctuary. This is James Carter. This is my journal. I am in a military facility with other survivors. My injury is bandaged, and my test was negative. But I am trapped, unsure of our fate, and deeply suspicious of our captors and one of our own. If you are still out there, if you're listening, if you want to know what happens inside the military's hidden facilities, what they do to the survivors they collect, what the screening is truly for, where Yuri has gone, and if there is any way to expose the truth hidden within this controlled environment, then please subscribe to Beyond Blackout. The truth is hidden deep within the concrete walls, and I am still here, trying to find it